We're on the air.
Good day.
It is.
I think I have to start this off with an apology to our viewers for being a little bit late. We had Thanksgiving up here, and we had family get-togethers, and some kind of under the weather, not feeling well kind of days. So we're back. We're live. We're healthy.
That's good.
Can't say we're wealthy.
No, but we're vertical.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
where's that vertigo? I forget.
Well, I was concerned that you weren't in the air and in my hair, so
Well, that's and speaking of, I did get my locks trimmed today. So.
Yes, you look very stylish.
Ooh.
Of course,
good.
That only works if you're watching the video version.
Yes, that's true.
If you're listening on Spotify or whatever other platform, but his hair does look good. Actually, I got a haircut too, but I don't have the panache that you have with the hair. Just.
I know that panache. That's the color, right? I think street silver.
I don't know. We're having such a jolly time considering everything around us is falling apart.
Well, I go back to that real old saying, and I can't remember which one of my relatives coined the phrase, but it goes something along the line of, if we keep digging through this horse manure, we're bound to find a pony.
Well,
so under all this stuff that's floating about, this excrement that we're dealing and wading through, maybe there is a silver lining, a pony. I don't know. We can only hope.
Well, we're so focused on what's happening in our neck of the woods, being that Canada, U.S., because we're the days of us worrying about what's happening around the world it's just too much to deal with. Our plate's full just trying to figure out what's happening around us here on this continent,
Yeah.
When the news is crazy stuff like global warming is pushing the planet to the brink, says the UN. Go, oh my God, the sky is falling. But these are the sort of stories we keep getting over and over. That's today's story from the usual culprits.
Well, and I guess that kind of gets down to a point when you think of the old, is it Aesop fable? Chicken Little. The sky is falling. The sky is falling. You can only call it so many times before people start to go, let's deal with something else. I mean, people now, I've seen on various social media platforms, going back to the 1970s and 1980s when global warming was going to kill us by the year 2000. If we don't stop taking care of the polar ice caps now, we're going to be under 400 feet of water by 2025.
And a quarter century later, curiously, we're still here.
Yeah. And apparently, I don't know, I haven't really checked into it to see for sure, but where the Pilgrims landed in Plymouth Rock, there's apparently a plaque there that they laid down in 1600 or something, and lo and behold, the water hasn't risen in 400 years.
Well, let's face it, there are a number of things of that environmental crusade group that, going back to even before the John Kerry kind of extremist nonsense, and it never came true. Look, the planet's always changing.
Very much so. Yeah.
Yesterday I was out on the beach just walking the dog because it was a break in the rain. We've had a lot of rain suddenly in the Great Lakes here. And you look out and we have more beach this year than we had last year. And that's because the water in Lake Huron is probably down about 2 feet. Now, that's a lot of water that's gone someplace. And, of course, you know that they can regulate the lakes through the various means of the canals and reservoirs and so on. But, last year, the water, our beach was half the size because it was way up. In fact, the problem was that in the spring, this is a year ago, they had trouble with boats in the marina because there was only about 6 inches of water from the top of the concrete dock that's been there, almost 100 years. Yeah. And then there's the gnashing of teeth and the wailing of, oh my God, the water is so high. And then when it's down, oh my God, now we have to spend money to dredge the canal into the harbor because the boats,
Oh yeah. Well, and again, we were up visiting family in the interior, and when we came back along the Fraser River, not surprisingly, I guess, this time of year, the Fraser River was down. Well, why is the river down? Well, a couple of things. One, it's starting to freeze, and if it's frozen water, it doesn't come down the channel.
Gee, what a surprise.
Yeah. So, don't get me wrong, people that are listening. It's not like we don't have a problem, right? We just don't know how to deal with it. Obviously, there's some kind of environmental changes going on. Yes, we're getting more fires. Yes, we're getting stronger winds. Those certain places are getting way more rain and floods than they normally do. But when I sit out here on the very rim of the circle of fire around the Pacific, I'm more concerned about the proliferation of the 5, 6, and 7 earthquakes that are taking hold of the region. That, to me, is way more tangible than, whether we get 50 inches of rain or 5 inches of rain. It's rain we can deal with. We have absolutely no control over what's going to happen if we decide to get a big 7 or an 8 or a 9 tremor just off the coast here. I have no idea what that would do. But
yeah, that's exactly right. In fact, I saw something on one of the scientific channels that there's a big escalation or jump in activity on the Ring of Fire with volcanoes, which has never happened before. Now, whether this is, what has never happened before mean? But if you suddenly have a lot of activity with spewing of ash into the atmosphere by literally half a dozen volcanoes around that Pacific Rim, you could have basically a winter of real negative proportions because
absolutely, yeah. And I guess for me, in a bit of a terrible to say me moment, maybe all those earthquakes and all these other places are reducing the stress over on our plates.
Sure.
So maybe, I don't know. I feel sorry for the people in the Philippines, the people in Russia, Japan, where they have these terrible, terrible shakers, and there's loss of life and loss of structures. And, for us, it's a foreboding of what's going to happen here when the big one happens.
Well, yeah.
But there's not much we can do about it. If Mother Nature decides tomorrow to let the big one rip, nothing is going to stop it. I'm sorry. We in Canada could probably stop it by having an earthquake tax imposed, and that will fix everything. But
that's the Canadian way.
It is.
When all else fails, tax it.
But again, it's interesting. I don't know what would happen, even what Border Poll is concerned with. We have a big shaker. What does that do with our land, with our structures? With would I-5 between Mexico and Alaska still be in one place? Would that the San Andreas Fault? I mean, it runs right through where the I-5 comes.
Sure.
What's that going to do to traffic and to the migratory plans of people, you know.
Well, how many years ago was the big earthquake that took down all those bridges in L.A.?
Well, there was that was around this time of year, because I know it was during I think it was a San Francisco had one when there was a baseball playoff, and that was I think in the 80s or 90s, not 100% sure. It wasn't any more than maybe 20 years ago when that big one in LA hit.
Yeah, because you saw all those videos at the time of cars going off and bridges collapsing. My point I was going to make was that those were monumental catastrophes, but they rebuilt. Yes, there were injuries and deaths, sadly, but that's nature. Yet, if you stay in that neck of the woods, the Palisades fire that destroyed thousands of homes, it was news for 2 weeks, and now nobody really talks about that anymore, and they still haven't built anything back.
It goes back to that book that I always manage to bring up 2 or 3 times over the last few years, A State of Fear by Michael Crichton. You know, just we push something to the envelope, and when people get tired of listening to that, we come up with a brand new fear that somebody has to grasp, and we've got to do this, and that's the way, basically, as that book says, since the end of the Second World War, we have raised generations of people to be afraid of something.
In spite of the fact that on December the 8th or 9th, I can't remember, President Roosevelt said we had nothing to fear but fear itself.
Yeah.
All right. And here you are. The Crichton book proves the opposite. And it is, it's the boogeyman concept, especially in today's sort of rich internet and media environment. The 5-minute newscast, gives you enough stuff there to scare the bejeebers out of most people, if you believe most of that stuff. And of course, the following day, that story is no longer relevant. There's another one that comes along.
Well, that's also, as you say, life imitating art, or art imitating life. The HBO series The Newsroom.
Yes.
Right, which brought forward the 72-hour life cycle of a story.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why people aren't picking up on this kind of stuff and thinking on their own. But
well, my theory, my armchair psychiatrist version, is that the large percentage of the population is cognitively declined over the last generation or so, because they. Well, if you look at it pragmatically, you go, how can you sell half the nonsense that is being sold to people? I mean, look at this thing that went on over the weekend, that the No Kings protests. I mean, listen, 2 things struck me there. It was so obvious, okay? And we talk about this cognitive decline. If you watch the videos that were made, mostly in the U.S., and there were a couple of crazies in Canada involved as well, but they were all the same people. There were no blacks in the crowd. There were no Hispanics in the crowd. There were no Asians in the crowd. They're all people that looked like you and I, around the same age, too. I'm thinking, man, there's a whole generation of folks around us that have lost their minds. Okay.
Well, we had that happen not too long ago, 7 months ago, when we voted in a government that rained down fear of the big bad boogeyman from the south, and if you don't take a stand now, you won't be able to have your elbows up very long.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you who the boogeymen were. It was the CEOs of GM, Ford, and Stellantis. There's your real boogeymans, and they weren't just making up stories; they followed through.
Yeah. And we've talked about that before in our broadcast, that, you can't have that whole thing of too big to fail, because these companies are looking at going, we're not going to fail here. If we're going to fail, let's at least fail in a place where we can at least pretend that we're doing something useful and beneficial, as opposed to hiring this and hiring that. And I feel very sorry for the however many workers it is on the auto factory industry.
Well, up to about 5,000 now they've lost their jobs.
But this just didn't happen today.
No,
it's been on a steady decline.
Look,
for quite a few years.
I'm going to say something that will probably piss off some of our Canadian listeners, viewers. Maybe we don't need an auto industry or can't keep an auto industry in this country. And I say that with great apprehension. I'll tell you why. Australia and New Zealand gave up the auto industry in their countries years ago. There is no auto industry in Australia or New Zealand because it wasn't viable. Okay, the Vauxhalls, the Holdens, the GMs, the Fords of the world left that part of the world because it was a very small market in terms of the sales of vehicles. There was no such thing as an Australian car or a New Zealand car. It was a knockoff of either a Vauxhall from the UK because obviously it's right-hand drive over there. And, they basically were making kits that were shipped over and put together by the Aussies. And, for the cost of doing so, eventually it made no sense because they could buy the car from Korea or they could buy it from Japan, whatever, which was pretty close by, and they had the infrastructure, and then they would, frankly, set up dealerships in Australia and New Zealand, and that was that. The same people who were fixing the Holdens and the Vauxhalls in Australia and New Zealand were the same people who went to work for the Hyundais and the Nissans and the whatevers. And Australia got over it. Now, they didn't have this situation that we in Canada did with the U.S., where we embraced the American vehicle culture, but we never kept the American vehicle culture, because had we done that, there wouldn't be Nissans and Hyundais and Volkswagens and BMWs on the roads here. Okay,
well, that's true. And I think what you have to do is just a challenge to our Canadian listeners. Just go out in your street and sit down in a chair, and you can count as the cars go by. It used to be an exception. Out here in particular, it used to be an exception. When we were visiting our friends on the North Shore, we would try and count the number of Teslas that we were going through in that hour drive from our house to the North Shore. And it got to the point where we were saying, well, why are we counting Teslas? Because there's way too many of them. Now, when I go for a walk around the neighborhood here, I am counting more on the North American cars, because I can usually fit them into my small pea brain and remember that number for a while. The big thing that North American still holds is for the half-ton, three-quarter-ton, and one-ton trucks. That's really what North America is there. Most of the cars on the road are the imports, be it from Europe or from Asia.
Well, so I'll give you some more bad news. Most of the parts that are put together in North America aren't parts from North America.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And more to the point, I think I told you this a couple episodes ago. We got a vehicle here, Equinox, the new 2025 Equinox. Open the door, and on the post it says "Made in Mexico." This car isn't even Canadian. Okay, this is a car that was imported from Mexico through the United States, obviously. And so, what are we talking about? The last Equinox that came off the assembly lines in Oshawa, Ontario, I had one of those 4 years ago. In fact, one of the reasons that was a big ballyhoo when I got the Equinox, that particular model 4 years ago, it was the last one made in at the Cami plant in Woodstock. Okay, that was the end of the line for making that car in Canada. So now the new version of that is made in Mexico. My grandson buys a Z71, which is the Silverado GM pickup truck. It's made in Mexico. They don't make them in Oshawa. Okay, sorry.
No.
So why is that still the case? Well, Mexico probably, for whatever reason, is more, I would say, malleable in the hands of the Americans than maybe we are. But I think it's to our own detriment, because this was a big mistake here. I
think you're right on that. Yeah, I think probably part of the problem is that over the last decade, in particular,
yes,
by going back further, we as a country have not really defined who we are or what we want.
Well, no, we did define. We're not Americans. That's been the definition.
Well, simplistically, we're not Americans.
Yeah, and that was a stupid thing to do.
Yeah, we've got nothing to show. We have a refinery maybe 3 refineries in Alberta, which may or may not be in Canada, depending on how things go over the next few months. We've got a steel plant down in your neck of the woods. I don't know of any other ones in the country. We've got a few aluminum smelters.
Yeah, mostly only in Quebec.
But, I don't know what it is that we do well. And apparently we can't even build ferries in Canada. We have to source $1 billion to China to build ferries.
Well, and of course the lying is that we're going to do all this thing with the steel industry in Canada, but it's the ferry is going to be built with Chinese steel. And what did the government just do? They're reducing tariffs on Chinese steel. I'm like, this makes no sense. Look, we have no industrial blueprint other than to deindustrialize over the last 10 years. That was the blueprint for probably the net zero crowd, for this whole climate change, and I'll call it bullshit that is permeated every policy that this grifter class elites in Ottawa, in Quebec have come up with. But if you're going to deindustrialize the country, and then keep going on about how you're going to be a leader in the G7. Well, how are you going to do that? You don't want to extract any fossil fuel out of the ground, because that doesn't meet your net zero ideology. You don't know how to build a mine, because it takes you 15 years in this country to even get approvals to build a mine. So rare earths and whatever that they keep talking about that we have an abundance of. And by the way, we really are, I think, country number 8 or 9 on the list of countries with rare earths, because the big players are China and Russia. And that's like 80% of all the rare earths. End of story. So we don't even bother with that, and then we poo-poo even whatever successes we have had in the past, whether it's in the aerospace industry or in the nuclear energy industry. We just shut that puppy down. Now they're talking about, we have to bring back small nuclear plants. Well, excuse me, we haven't built a nuclear plant in Canada in 50 years. What are you talking about?
We had those things called the Avro Arrows, which were dismantled and thrown in the Great Lakes. We had the Candu reactors, which were shipped overseas
to Pakistan. Who made bombs out of the waste material.
So, we were talking pre-production, our military. I feel so sorry for them. We're now talking that we're going to maybe renege on our F-35, whatever.
Yes.
And maybe take a look at the Griffins. And then we've got, maybe we're going to ink a deal for some submarines. But, wait, here's another contender coming in.
Laughable.
We couldn't, it's still to be determined why we can't send the Buffalo troop carriers over to the Ukraine. But I think it's boiled down to the fact they found that there was only 3 left in Canada, and if we shipped them off, we would have absolutely none. I don't know. Yeah, the poor armed forces people. We've sent them into harm's way. We've brought them back. We don't look after them when they're here and suffering. We don't pay them enough.
And we don't house them properly. That's one of the news items today. That they're living in substandard housing, and there's like 5,000 units short. What are you talking about? And you want this military to protect you from who? They can't protect themselves from the weather because they're told they have to find habitat for humanity housing. Literally, this is what they were told. Come on. This is a military that, it doesn't even come up to the same size as the National Guard of the larger U.S. states. I mean, come on. They have more aircraft in the National Guard of Illinois than the entire RCAF has.
Wasn't it something that came out of one of the C-SPAN talks up here of the number of employees with the revenue agency is about 3 times what the military is?
I heard that this morning. There's more people working in the CRA than in the military.
Yeah,
but that's we've armed up the CRA to come after your tax. Which, by the way, you probably read that today. And only 17% of the questions asked of the CRA are actually accurate response. Yeah. I mean, what are you talking about? But
we're going to hire more of them to make sure that
they
can get it up to 20%, maybe. But.
Listen, again, for American listeners are going, what are these guys going on about? Tonight, our illustrious leader, this is the 22nd of October, just for the record here, if you watch this later on in the week or after what we're about to tell you. The illustrious Prime Minister of Canada is going to go on national TV tonight to explain to the great unwashed about the budget that is going to come down from way up high. The banker is going to speak tonight to tell us, the great unwashed, as I say, how the country is going to deal with its budget
issues.
Now, in the parliamentary world that we live in, by the way, when you have the No Kings protests in this country, they had it. Sadly, we have a king, so I'm not sure what that was about, but I digress. He's going to explain to us about the budget. Now, in parliamentary lingo, there's something unethical or illegal about that, because when a budget is brought down, that usually is kept in secret before it's revealed in Parliament, and anybody who reports on it is sequestered until the actual budget is read in the House, and that's usually after the markets close, because you don't want to influence the stock market or the banking system or whatever. This guy tonight apparently is going to tell us all about the budget that he's going to talk about in real life
in 2 weeks.
In 2 weeks. Now, either they're completely stupid and they're completely incompetent in the Prime Minister's office, letting this guy, the banker, go on with his gibberish tonight, and we don't know what he's going to say about it. But I guarantee you, very little substance will be of consequence in his talk about the budget. This is all about, let's go after the opposition, because these guys are starting to get on our nerves. And it's pretty evident to me that over the last week, they have gone into overdrive to discredit the leader of the opposition, because he dared to question the competence of the government, and particularly the judicial system, and the law enforcement community over the scandal after scandal after scandal that has not been investigated by the National Police Force. And it's a very simple question. How is that possible? Okay. And he's gone out on a limb here and said that, it's despicable, basically, that the brass in the RCMP, basically acquiesced to the orders of the Prime Minister's office. Or said, well, we couldn't investigate because they put all their stuff into the non-disclosure part of cabinet. So for 100 years, we'll never know what actually went on during the Emergencies Act, for example. Never mind the SNC-Lavalin stuff and the ArriveCAN stuff. I mean, the list is quite lengthy. Never even talk about the unethical behavior of the same Prime Minister, who was proven by the Ethics Commission to be unethical. But we're not, that's all is swept under the carpet. But now, when the popularity of the current bunch, who's only been in 10 months, accomplished nothing with Boogeyman to the south, travels all over hell's half acres, signs nothing with anybody about...
Or signs things, but they're really meaningless.
They're meaningless. Word salads on a piece of paper. Now, tonight we're going to find out that Boogeyman is actually not Donald Trump. It's Pierre Poilievre, who is going to be the reason why we're in such trouble. Okay? I go out on a limb to say this now because there's something very smelly about this whole thing. Okay? Incidentally, so, yeah. Buddy was supposed to, the Prime Minister was supposed to be off to Asia. Or I guess he will be off at some point because the ASEAN conference will be on soon, and he will meet up with Orange Man in Kuala Lumpur or wherever. I think it's Kuala Lumpur they're holding that thing.
And we're probably going to sign another defense pact over there.
Oh, yes. Well, let's just compare mooses with koalas. Okay, the mooses go off into the White House twice and basically get about 5 minutes airtime with Orange Man, okay, and accomplish. The koala goes to the White House last week, and not only does he sign an $8 billion trade agreement to buy submarines, airplanes, canola, rare earths, you name it, okay, he actually sits in the White House in the cabinet room with the president and all his ministers, secretaries.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What does the moose do? The moose is made a joke of in the Oval Office, not once but twice, and walks away with nothing. Now, how is it possible that the koala was able to do what the moose couldn't? Who lives right next door, by the way, to the eagle.
I don't know. We've talked about that many times. Maybe history will point back and say, at this particular juncture, this happened, and because of that, this happened. The butterfly effect, maybe. I don't know. But it still gets down to a point, with President Trump. He is going to do what he's going to do. And whether we like it or whether we don't, like we're seeing here now, all of our snowbirds that are apparently now not afraid to go to the United States and live in the warm climes of Arizona and New Mexico and California, but they have the audacity to want to photograph and fingerprint us now.
Well,
they've always been that way. It was just the fact that they chose not to.
Well, this is unfortunately the elephant in the room we're going to have to talk about. Okay, Canada is a sovereign country, but the elbows up crowd really want to ensure stays that way, and so do I. But there's a small problem here. You can't have it both ways. Okay. You can't expect to be treated like an American when you're not an American.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Imagine if the shoe was on the other foot and all of a sudden, there were Americans who are showing up in Canada and stay as long as they want because they're Americans. We treat them just like Canadian. These people would lose their minds. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So the issue of whatever regulation that they're enforcing, and for you and I, who spent a good portion of our career dealing with exactly those sorts of issues day to day, the rules are the rules. The State Department comes out with a list of countries that are on the visa list. We just don't happen to be on it, thankfully. But there are other rules that apply. Okay, and if you get too uppity, you might be on that list. So I wouldn't get too crazy over the fact that the vast majority of Americans don't give a rat's behind what Canadians think about the border crossing regulations. Okay, that's of no concern to them.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
And I find it interesting. As you know, the Toronto Blue Jays are in the World Series. They'll be playing the LA Dodgers for starting Friday. That'll be good fun. All of a sudden, all seems to be forgiven. As long as the Blue Jays and their fans can travel to LA. And I'm thinking, talk about hypocrisy. These people have really no shame whatsoever, right? I hope the Blue Jays beat the hell out of the Dodgers and they win the World Series. But that doesn't make me mad at Americans. This is baseball.
We've talked about that before too. I mean, we as a a group of individuals have forgotten the basic premise that it's okay to disagree with one another, but it doesn't make us enemies.
No,
it doesn't make, I mean, come on, folks. We've talked about this before in many broadcasts about politics and how we need adults in the room. But the reality is a vast majority number of Canadians are not adults either. They're whining about having to be photographed and fingerprinted. I photographed and fingerprinted many Americans coming up here. Not just Americans. I've done it to a great many people from around the world. It is a rule and a regulation. That's the way it is.
And there's a reason for that. Whether you agree with it or not, it doesn't really make a hill of beans a difference. Okay, whatever Canada decides to impose on visitors is Canada's prerogative, just like it's the Americans or the Brits or the Indonesians, whoever. You go there, you're a visitor. Okay. Yeah. One of the dumbest things that came out this week that kind of is in that realm is they were saying that the Canadian passport now more powerful than the American passport because it's accepted by more countries visa-free than the U.S. passport. And they were listing countries like Papua New Guinea, Belarus, Iran. Well, how many of these places do Canadians really want to visit visa-free? Next thing you'll know, North Korea will make the Canadian passport, visa-free.
Tom, that's been a bugbear of mine for the last 3 or 4 years. And it's not the fact that these are visa-exempt makes us visa-exempt. It's all these countries really want to see what a snowflake looks like. Because all they have to do is open up about the first or second page of Canada, and it'll be full of snowflakes and stick people and snowmen and just utter nonsense that is not Canadian. It's just that's the only reason our passport is in such high demand is because it looks like a coloring book that the immigration people from around the world can color in at their leisure.
Well, I think the passport kind of reflects the juvenile sophomoric approach that's been in government now for over a decade. That's really what it reflects,
Yeah,
and
it is.
We've lost our own self-respect, and if all we can do is sit around and say that what makes us different is we're not Americans, that's a sad reflection of where we've slipped down to. By the way, we're in 33rd spot now in terms of growth in the OECD. So we're, that number one in the G7 is pretty elusive. We can't even, get into the OECD top 10.
I hate to burst your bubble there, Tom, but we could go to 39th tomorrow.
Well,
and we'd be proud of that, probably. Well, we wouldn't be. Maybe the government would.
One of the things that I saw yesterday with one of the ministers, Miss Haidu, who's the minister responsible for food in schools. I'm going to make it that simple. She says that Canadians want to make food programs permanent in schools because there are so many struggling, parents struggling, kids don't get fed, and they got to make this permanent. Now, what does that tell you about the state of affairs here? The federal government now has to ensure that young people get fed because they've got such a fabulous economy that their parents can't afford to send lunches to school. They can't afford to feed their kids. But no, we're going to, like the good Marxists that they are, we'll have a food program permanently in the schools because that's a sign of a really progressive country. There's a sign of a country that's falling apart.
I wholeheartedly. But I kind of hope that somewhere along the line that we don't send the equivalent amount of money off to some... What was one that came up the other day?
Senegal.
Yeah. They gave a $10 million grant to study the sexual relations of an aphid fly or something. It just all utter nonsense. And why we even look at that when that $10 million would have gone a long way to our own food banks or to housing or to something else. it just shows again, you're right, the JV mindset our politicians have. NAFTA, we negotiated. We sent politicians down. The United States sent businessmen. I don't know who the Mexicans sent, but it probably wasn't bureaucrats.
Well, I think to compare the Mexican approach to the Canadian approach is really black and white. The Mexicans have decided, or I should say, have come to the conclusion that they're going to go bilateral with the U.S. because they've read the tea leaves. The U.S. administration has no intention of doing a NAFTA again. It's going to, and their policy is we do one-on-one. What's good for us in a one-on-one relationship. We're not going to. They're not interested in multilateralism in the sense of the old days.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Mexicans have decided we'll deal with the Americans one-on-one. The fools on the Hill in Ottawa are still, talking about CUSMA will be. There is no CUSMA. Okay, stop this. Renaming it's not going to make it any different. Trump is around for another 3 years or so, and the government there is not interested in any trilateral arrangement.
No.
They've already said to these fools in Ottawa that they have no interest in having any relationship with the automobile industry outside of the United States, period. Okay, so these companies are shutting down one after another because two things happen. One, they can continue to dominate the market within the domestic market within the U.S. without having to pay additional money. Plus, they create jobs in the various states where these plants will be relocated. So, this is not a secret. This has been made very clear.
Yeah.
By the Lutnicks of the world and the whole tariff business, which by the way, Canadians need to understand is not aimed at Canada. It's a global approach that the Americans have. Whether we like it or not, whether it's a good idea or bad idea, time will tell. But for the moment, that's the reality. And all this yelling and screaming and bad-mouthing the only neighbor you have on the only continent you live on is really unhelpful, as they say in diplomatic terms. So, it's very clear that the situation that has developed over a decade, we can be angry with Carney and his gang, but it's the same gang that was there in 2015 with some minor change. Yeah. But nothing's, this was to deindustrialize Canada based on the ideological BS that they dreamt up for climate change. That's one of the cornerstones of why we are going where we're going.
Yeah, very
okay. So everything is colored by that ideology. Then you mix in a little bit of the business of, for example, the interests of one particular province in this country that's never even signed on to the actual charter and the constitution, if you will, of the country, who says, if you don't do what we tell you, we're leaving. They've done it twice already, and I think they're up for a third time at bat. And I'm very concerned it's going to be one of those Springer hits, that we saw in baseball the other night.
Yeah.
Because when you hear guys like Blanchette say, look, we have 6 demands we're going to put on the paper for the budget. If you don't meet those 6 demands, we're not going to vote for the budget. So you can pretty well kiss those 6 demands away as far as the Liberals are concerned. So they'll vote against the budget with the Conservatives. That leaves the 7 dimwits from the NDP to be bought off by this grifter class, which is running the country at the moment. And I think that it's going to be an utter catastrophe if this country is thrown on the funeral pyre, basically, by the NDP, who have no representation anywhere, literally, in the country where it matters. Ontario, Quebec, Saskatchewan, Alberta. Who are these 7 people? They're nobodies. Okay, and these are the people that are going to be in league with the grifters that have been running the show for 10 years, and the banker who thinks he's running a bank, not a country. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I guess also coupled with this, and maybe we'll find out tonight with the budget speech issued, maybe we'll find out that maybe the bureaucrats are going to talk to the U.S. and see what they can get for some of our poorer auto workers and maybe get them visas to travel to the United States so that they will be able to continue to build the car, although not in Canada, but at least they'll be employed. And the upside to that is that they're going to get paid in U.S. dollars. It could be a win-win for them.
Listen, when Champagne, the minister Francois Philippe Champagne, says that the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, says that Canada and Germany have solid fiscal positions, you have to say, this is nuts. Okay, they deindustrialized Germany. It's the sick man of Europe. They deindustrialized Canada. It's the sick man of North America. But the IMF, which by the way bails out sick countries, is saying that they're in solid fiscal positions. This is what happens when you're delusional. Okay, so when you see a light coming through the tunnel, you don't say that's a train coming my way. You say, oh no, that's just a light at the end of the tunnel. Boom. And I get nervous when the International Monetary Fund is used to explain how wonderful the economy of Canada is. There's a lot of
who knows about that?
Yeah, right.
We have enough problems trying to figure out what's going on day to day here. We can't worry about the global stuff anymore.
Well, like I say, tonight will be very interesting for Canadians to watch this fellow go on about a budget that he shouldn't really be talking about without, having some specifics, because that's going to. That's what is this for, Brookfield?
Sorry?
Is he doing this for Brookfield so that all his American pals can figure out a way to invest in Canada?
Well, we'd have to record or listen to the thing and start ticking off the 103 known possible conflicts of interest.
Yeah, the known ones.
But I don't. It's really too bad that. And again, I haven't really been a political junkie all that long, but I have never ever seen in Canadian political history a government that has turned out to be so widely criticized, and I wouldn't say despised yet, but certainly criticized on anything they do. And yet, I'm always amazed that if there was an election tomorrow, that gang of thieves would probably be reelected. It's just I don't understand it. We had that. Basically, what this government has been doing over the last decade is a mere reflection of what happened in the late 80s when we had a conservative government that was tossed out on its keister and left with only 3 seats in the House. I don't know whether the voters today are afraid of doing that. It boggles my mind that you let the arrogance and the rot and the stink prevail. We have to. It's like everything else. If you're a consumer and you don't like the fact that Walmart is selling you something in a non-recyclable plastic container, we can fix that by not buying that product. We have the same thing going on with the government. We can fix that by not voting for it.
Yeah, well, I think there's not enough money in the Treasury, whether you borrow it or print it, to get us out of the mess that we're in, or going forward, vis-a-vis the sort of the economic reality of this country. Wilfrid Laurier, I think, said it, or it might have been some prime minister earlier than that we were drawers of water and hewers of wood. And, that was probably a very good bit of advice, because all we got left now is drawing water and hewing wood. And if we sort of move that into 2025 sort of parlance, we need to dig stuff out of the ground, take stuff off the ground, turn it into something and sell it, because that's all we got left. Okay, and this crowd doesn't even want to do that. Yeah. So what does that leave you with? I mean, I don't know. I mean, it makes no sense. They keep talking about this green energy thing. The green energy is a myth. Okay, it fills little gaps here and there, but it's not how you run an industrialized state. And by the way, to save the world, when our impact on all this climate stuff is like 1.7% of the population, impact-wise, what are we doing here? You know, well, why have become?
That's also something that you have to sit back and think. If it's 1.7%, we had a previous prime minister who was going to plant 2 billion trees that never got off the ground. But we have far more trees in this country to offset carbon than what we're being taxed on.
Exactly.
We shouldn't even be at 1.7%.
Yeah. Well, look, something is happening here which I think has them spooked. And it's not Orange Man. It's other things that they themselves created. Their own incompetence has created the mess, and now they're going to look for some other boogeymans domestically, because that's going to be that's all they got left. But when you look at things like the price of oil is down to $57 a barrel, and there's actually talk of it going down to $48. You don't read the Canadian press, because you got to go to the international arenas and find out what things are happening, which are totally to the exclusion of any Canadian interests. If oil goes to $48, even what we pump out of the ground isn't going to save us, because it's too cheap. Okay, and our number one export market is the U.S. Well, you know, if oil is going to be $48 a barrel, they don't need our gas. They're going to be drowning in this stuff. You know, so right now in some place in the U.S., gas is under $2 a gallon. This is a gallon. Okay, so that works out to 50 cents U.S. per liter in Canada. Well, when's the last time you saw 50 cents per liter? Okay, make it 70 cents because it's Canadian. When's the last time you saw 70 cent liter gasoline in Canada? Okay, in town here.
To show you my age, I remember when we converted from gallons to liters, and it was quite a shock to see that it was only 19.5 cents a liter.
Now you are showing your age. But I mean, there are forces that are happening that we have no control over, geopolitically, and we always seem to be betting on the wrong horse geopolitically. You know, when the whole Israeli thing, we went the wrong way, and it hasn't worked out. You can't call Hamas, a group of people that share our values. Like, what are you talking about? I'm not an exaggeration here for a moment, but that's basically what the PMO said. Then you have him continually pissing away money within this Ukrainian conflict, which, what does Ukraine give us for this? Nothing. Like, where's our strategic interest in Ukraine? Other than, Krista Freeland happens to be Ukrainian background, but so what? And by the way, what's she doing over there and still having a seat in Parliament? I don't understand that. How you can be an MP but be based in Kiev.
Well,
anyway, the list just goes on and on.
It's just a Ponzi scheme. But, I don't understand the Canadian psyche. I mean, we have already proven that our retention period is less than that of a goldfish. You're right. Something's going to come out tonight. I wouldn't be a bit surprised that it's going to start slagging the official opposition.
Oh yeah, I think you made a book on that.
I can hardly wait to see the repercussions of that, because basically everything that the leader of the official opposition has said has kind of, in one way or another, been adopted into the current government's policies.
Well, they say
one form or another.
Yeah, they say they're going to do it, but in fact, if you get into the nitty gritty of it, you find out that there's only yes, but with carve outs all over the place.
And that's true, but that's politics, right? There's got to be a carve out somewhere along the line. I mean, why the Calgary, right? I think it's got a Liberal MP, and Edmonton has a Liberal MP. I mean, that's the first time in a long time that there's been any. Well, Edmonton's always had a Liberal candidate. I don't think Calgary has had for the longest time. So I wouldn't be a bit surprised that in order to sell this whole fairy tale of how good we're doing, we're going to find out that the newest submarine testing facility is going to be in the Glenmore Reservoir in Calgary. Just so that they can vote and get that back in there,
Well, I think it's time to really consider what are the alternatives to ordinary people as this thing continues to unravel. I mean, Canadians are going to be in a tough spot here.
Well, we're starting to find that, aren't we? We're hearing rumors now that the government wants to take away our old age pension, and for some people, it's the lifeblood. Without that, they would be, adding millions more to the food banks and the welfare lines. And yet it's probably the same people that had their elbows up and voted Liberal last time that would...
Well, the Liberals are saying that everything's been improving since Carney took over 10 months ago, and that the budget will be balanced in 3 years. This is the crap that's coming across the wire at the moment. But I guess that's good news, because all the people who be laid off will be able to go to all those food banks that are just growing like dropsy,
Oh, they can probably go back to school and get their lunches.
No, I think the cult that is, and again, it's strange that the dots that I see emerging from a lot of this stuff is this axis between Ottawa and the Quebec Liberals, because this is really what runs this thing. This is the real axis of destruction in Canada is the Ottawa elites and the Quebec Liberal base in Quebec. Because every time you start scratching this and you discover that it's another example of the liberal corruption that is deeply rooted in that province. The Quebec Separatist Party has made this clear a number of times, that a lot of the stuff that goes on that they're against in terms of Confederation is because the corrupt Liberals in Quebec. Because when they were asked about the money that comes into Quebec, for example, from Western Canada and the equalization payments, the PQ leader has already said, well, yeah, a lot of that money we never see. It disappears into slush funds run by various Quebec organizations, NGOs, they've got quangos set up by the government. There are a lot of little bits and pieces the federal government has set up in Quebec that exists nowhere else in the country, just to keep those guys inside the family.
Yeah.
Okay. So there are literally billions of dollars that are sucked into the machinery of the liberal gang in Quebec that just disappears, and that's a very strong axis between Ottawa and that bunch. And it doesn't matter. You can just go and do the research yourself of how many corporations and corporatists, if you will, are part of the liberal government grifter class. The majority come from Quebec. They're not from Toronto. They're not from West. They're basically Quebec. Quebec is the tail that wags the dog. And that is the dog known as the Liberal Party. And they have had, from Trudeau now, Carney was anointed by that crowd. Okay, it's really very simple. The carpetbaggers in Quebec went out and found this guy and said, okay, we're going to make you prime minister. You're going to do what you're told. You notice that there's no backlash whatsoever coming out of the Quebec wing of the Liberal Party. Of course not. This is very clear. But Canadians outside of that province better wake up, because that's who's going to, drive this place finally into the ditch. It's not Quebecers themselves. I don't have a fight with Quebecers. I have a fight with the corrupt bunch that they've permitted. Why do you have a dairy industry that is primarily located in Quebec and all trade negotiations stop as soon as you start talking about dairy? Who's getting paid off here? This is nonsense. This is so juvenile and sophomoric. But that they're willing to burn down the country for the cost of milk.
Well, and again, that goes back to we as consumers. We have the choice. If U.S. dairy was allowed in Canada,
I don't have to buy it if I
God
don't like
forbid,
it.
holy.
I
Yes, we don't have to buy it.
Exactly.
And if you don't buy it,
they won't.
And it's not selling,
they won't sell it.
What's going to happen?
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah.
We are. Then that is one of the other keystones of the Canadian. It hurts us. We do not like to compete. We have this real aversion to competition. You know, if you're gonna, you got to get out and dirty to compete. That's what we don't do. That we look for government subsidies. I mean, look what's happening. The auto industry is being repatriated to the U.S. Auto industry is being repatriated to the U.S. What do? Well, let's give those people who've got nothing to do money. That's not how a real economy works. Okay, it's a terrible, terrible thing that those people's jobs are gone. But you don't give them false hope by saying, we'll send you a check for the next 5 years. Let the other people who work and pay taxes, and you'll sit at home. This is stupid, you know.
Again, that goes back to something that we are kind of familiar with. Is why isn't our government now going to the UAW and saying, look, we've got a bunch of people here that are skilled, able. They've been building this car. It doesn't matter whether it's being built in Toronto or Oshawa or New Mexico or Ohio. They might have to change from working in metric back to imperial, but that's a small change. How many of these people can we get in on a special visa class? Why aren't we having that kind of discussion as opposed to let's give them a whole bunch of money for nothing? Yeah.
Well, it's the same argument that you're going to have to make with Western canola farmers. Why they would rather get into a pissing match with China over electric cars because they know that if they don't, boogeyman in Washington is going to bring the hammer down on them. The only reason they put 100% tariff on Chinese cars is they got a memo or a text from the White House and said, "You do this, or we do something else that you and I are unaware of."
Well, that's true, and for all the people that really are into that, we can't have Chinese electric cars coming in here. Blah, 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 blah. You don't have to buy them. If that's Chinese cars, yes, they may be cheap, but if they turn out to be substandard, they turn out to be above whatever it is, you as a consumer don't have to buy that product. And if the product doesn't sell, it's not going to stay here.
That's right. And by the way, we'll continue to build RAV4s in Ontario if the company that Toyota wants to build RAV4s, and it makes sense. If RAV4s aren't selling in Canada, trust me, they won't build RAV4s in Canada. And that's got nothing to do with Trump. Okay.
No.
And there are lots of examples of that. So in many ways, we talked earlier about the coal car thing. We're going to go down the way of Australia. And by the way, there's no such thing as a Canadian car. Okay, there never was. In fact, to some extent, that's what killed the Australian-New Zealand car industry because they had to come up with an American car with right-hand drive. I know this is not a big deal, but it was a big deal because you have to retool a lot of stuff to make that work. Which is why they all drive Japanese cars, which is right-hand drive anyway. Or Korean cars, whatever.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I just don't understand why we would be so naive as to believe that getting our elbows up is going to solve the problem. And like I said, the cognitive decline of a large percentage of our population just astounds me. However, suddenly, because we're in the World Series, we're going to put that aside.
Maybe we will visit the United States, but only the Los Angeles.
Well,
anyhow, it's a strange situation, and again, one that we're certainly not going to be able to resolve yet again today.
No, we won't resolve it, but we're going to be, having to eat from the fruit of that tree. that these guys have grown. And what is happening, I think, is a whole bunch of stuff that are unrelated, but yet are. We have a jump in crime. We have a jump in homelessness. We have a jump in unemployment. We have a jump in taxes. We have all these things that are all going in negative directions. So societally and economically and culturally and whatever, and so taken independently, go, well, okay, you have a conversation about these things sectorally, as they like to say now. That's a new word, by the way, that PMO is going. We're dealing with things sectorally. So if we deal with unemployment sectorally, then we can talk about it in isolation of crime that's sectorally over here and growing like Topsy, or
we could, however, Tom, meld that together. We could have the crime sector and the immigration sector converge, just like they did in Australia when it was a penal colony, where you have to have a criminal record to get in.
Yeah. Well, here you earn your criminal record to stay in.
God, are we a cynical bunch of?
We certainly are, but we deserve to be, because we're living in an alternative universe sometimes. I really wonder how it's possible that I live 50 kilometers from another country and it totally reacts differently to stuff than we do. Yet it's only the St. Clair River between us that changes it. Something's bizarre here. I don't know. Well, I do know. We fell into that trap of cradle to grave government support, which took away the incentives from a whole generation of people. And we imported literally millions of people who come from a similar government sort of appropriation of rights and services and what have you. So they fit in right to that. The government does everything. And sometimes I hear people sitting around in our community and all they talk about is the government needs to do this and the government, they never say I have to do something or there's never any community. It's always the government. That's a very Canadian thing. And
the other side of that coin is that the government was way too much. I remember, and again, this is going to show my age, when we were cleaning out various bits of paper and things from when my parents passed away, my dad's income tax form was a 5x7 sheet of paper, two-sided. That was his entire tax return. I have no idea how many pages it is now. The Income Tax Act went from something that was relatively simple to the point where the CRA can't even answer 5 times out of 100.
That's right.
What's correct?
That's right.
So there's something fundamentally wrong, and I think part of the problem is that we have, in my estimation, in Canada, come to rely on government too much.
Oh,
why is it now that we have? When we were growing up, we had a game called lawn darts, and we were smart enough to realize that you didn't stand under the dart and watch it come down to impale you. You got out of the way. Now we have laws against that, and we actually have to put it on there that you don't open up the batteries and drink the battery acid because that's going to hurt you. We have laws for this, and we've become very, very stupid. You cannot enact laws to save yourself. Yeah. and I have a feeling that that's what this federal government in particular is trying to do is we've got a gun buyback program, which is just like throwing bags of money into a dumpster fire. We've got all kinds of things that the government is doing because we need a law to do this. We need a law to do that. No, we don't. We just need to get back to having some common sense. An immigration program that worked decades ago that is in total disarray now. Let's get back to the model that worked and let's try that out again. Maybe it needs to be tweaked a little bit, but the reality is that it worked. It was well respected. It was a model for other countries.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I can't tell you the number of times I was overseas or people in other jurisdictions asked me to explain how the Canadian system worked because it had such a positive reputation for fairness, for effectiveness, for efficiency. And that's not to say it was perfect, like you said. But it's...
yeah. And I was talking with an individual just yesterday, and he has his wife here, and she's in the process of trying to get her permanent resident papers. She has been here now 4 years, and when he talked to his MP last month, they finally got a case number. Yeah. Now, if this isn't a system that's broken, I don't know what is. And that's really just a microcosm of the whole problem of this country is that we, as I started off the show, under all this manure, there's got to be a pony, right? I mean, we have to dig to get back and find out what it is that we really want to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the thing is that we're missing a few good people from standing up. Canadians have been convinced that they can't do anything, that this course of action that we're following will be okay. The majority of Canadians still believe, I think, in the tooth fairy, basically, because there's no other way you can explain this. If you do the same thing over and over and over again and expect a different result, then like I said, there is a cognitive decline in Canada across the board here, because you're not going to get a different result.
And that's true. And I guess that also go back, I think we were talking pre-production. The leader of the opposition has the audacity to stand up and criticize the National Police Force. Maybe the leader of the official opposition is out to lunch. Maybe he's not. But it still begs the question, is there not somewhere somebody in that organization that would be willing to stand up and say he's right or he's wrong?
Well,
surely to goodness isn't that
we've lost the thread here, because we don't have to go back way too far in history to remind people of Brian Mulroney and Airbus. They seem to investigate that with no problem, because that guy happened to be a conservative. How about Jean Chrétien and his scandals? Interesting, nobody really investigated that. And everybody knows how deeply he was involved with the Quebec group in that particular scandal. So, it's we have a two-tier system here. Again, it brings you back to my point of the axis between Quebec Liberals, corrupt as hell, and the Ottawa Liberals, also corrupt as hell. That's the axis, okay? And you've got a smattering of people from Atlantic Canada, Ontario, who are part of that Ottawa orbit. The rest of the country is really, on the periphery of their shenanigans, but they get impacted. And, you've got people like the Premier of Alberta who says, you know what, time's running out. This isn't going to stand if you keep doing this. And I see there's good news that lunatic who was the mayor of Calgary was shown the door last night. So, she's a Godnig, a one-term mayor. The first time in the history of Calgary that the mayor did not win re-election. And, she's the first female mayor of Calgary, but that's neither here nor there. We've got female mayors in other places who are either doing a good job or a lousy job. I don't think they have the market cornered on that. But
again, that has to go back into the whole point of what a bit of a problem with Canada is that this is the first female mayor. Well, who cares?
Yeah, who cares? We're past that. Exactly.
We should be past that.
Well,
we've got the first openly gay, and who cares?
Who cares?
And the issue is that individual capable to do the job, and are they doing a good job?
Well,
that's. I don't care whether going back to 2015, if the Prime Minister of the day had 100% women in his cabinet, if those women were competent to do the job that they're supposed to do.
Yes.
Well, and we have to get back onto that track of looking at who the person is, regardless of skin color, gender, sexual orientation, whatever it is. Yep. Let's get back to the issue of merit. Can that person do the job?
Yep, you're right. And I think that maybe we're getting there, but it's a slow climb. We don't have the octane, so to speak, in our veins, in our political veins in this country to move this ahead with any kind of speed, compared to our neighbors to the south, and to even places like Germany where the light's gone off and said we can't do this anymore because you're going broke. In the wider picture. We're still like a colony of that kind of thinking that we know what's best for you, and so that's got to stop. And I think it is stopping, but that's why let's see what happens tonight with this. I think this is going to be a speech for not the ages, but this could be the hinge moment for Canada in many ways. Because,
are we talking watershed moments or event horizon moments?
No. This is I used the word hinge moment. It either goes this way or that way, like the door swinging. If I'm very pessimistic, I don't think it's going to give us any insight as to what chances are after the 4th of November on this thing. If Canada doesn't give itself a chance to rethink what we've done, reflexively for the last 10 months, after almost 10 years of the same nonsense. If that isn't changed, then there's no hope here for this country. I'm sorry, and then all bets are off on what you do with Alberta and Quebec, because you're not going to be able to have a legitimate argument with people who are going to be just so vexed with being looked like they're stupid. And I think what lastly, and then we'll wrap it up because we've gone for an hour and 18 minutes. Ontario is really the key to what's going to happen after the budget. You lose a few more plants that close down, particularly not just the auto industry, but others that are dependent on trade with the only market that we have next door. This ludicrous argument that we can diversify with Asia and Europe, it takes years, if in fact there's an opportunity for us to sell stuff there. Because I think that if that would have presented itself before, it would have been done. There is no clamoring in Asia for our stuff, except China wants to dig up stuff here and take it home and make it into something and sell it back to us. That's it. Europeans could care less. This is a crazy notion that the European Union sits around in Brussels worrying about Canada. They're not going to come and save us. China's not going to come and save us. We have to save ourselves from ourselves. And that means, deciding that this ship has to be turned around because it's heading on the shoals. And, the captain is out, worrying about what tunes are being played in the climate change salon. So, But this is it.
Yeah.
And you know what? There's no guarantee even if we do that, because maybe the rot is so deep into the timbers.
Well, yeah.
Maybe you can't save it.
Some of those home improvement shows where they open up the wall and find out that there is no 2x4 left there.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, my fear is not for me; it's for my kids and my grandkids, because they're not getting the same opportunities I had. It's as clear as crystal. And without turning this around, all those platitudes I'm getting from the Carney and from his minions and that whole grifter class is nonsense. There's crazy stuff like the high-speed rail. We've forgotten all about that. Like 6 months ago, that was the story of the day. We're going to build a 350-mile-an-hour train between Quebec City and Toronto. Who's going to be on that train? Well, it's going to take us 10 years to plan it. Come on. It's nonsense. Nobody takes the train now. Why would they suddenly do that? It takes you half an hour, 45 minutes to fly there. No one's going to take a train through and stops in all sorts of places. That's not a high-speed train. These people have never been on a bullet train in Japan or in France on the TGV. It doesn't stop at every chicken shit town along the way. That's, But anyhow, I digress for a moment. But again, these promises have been made. This nonsense of buying 12 submarines, with technology that's mostly American that won't be sold to us, that we're going to build the military or the RCA by buying Griffins from Sweden with technology that the Americans won't allow to be put in the airplane, and we're going to be a NORAD still. Get a grip. This is nonsense. That's just one. Sectorally, that is nonsense. There's that
Good
word.
Segue. Good segue. I know. Yeah, it's again. It started off with a fun, light.
Well, it is still fun because.
Oh, it's good. It's perversely
fun. It is perverse. You got that right. But you know what? I got to tell you, this is the longest episode we've ever done.
I think so. Well, that's only because we missed a couple of weeks.
So people are going to get their money's worth this time.
Oh, I hope so.
Still free.
Speaking of which, don't forget to hit a like button, and if you can buy us a coffee, we'd certainly like it.
That's right. And don't forget to subscribe and tell your friends that the two guys talking over the fence.
That's right.
Are here.
We may not know it.
Yep. That's
but right. we can sure put a good spin on it.
Yeah, it's a spin, all right. All right. Well, we'll have to see what happens tonight. Maybe we'll do a short one on Friday to see how this pans out.
Yeah, well, it could be. I mean, if they're going to present the budget on TV, maybe we'll have a vote of non-confidence tomorrow.
We'll have our own vote. We'll vote. You and I will vote. Vote of 2.
Maybe long tooth.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to push our adios button here, and we'll see you soon.
I know.
I know.
Yes. Have fun.
You too.